So now let us move to e4 d5. This opening is called Scandinavian defense. Actually makes a lot of sense because with this move, black is immediately fighting against white's central dominance and actually forcing white to exchange this e4 pawn because, okay, e5 is obviously not so great because black can play c5, knight c6, and the pawn on f5 is too exposed. So white practically has to take on d5. And now black has two ways to try to take this pawn back with queen takes d5, the most natural, but there is another move, knight f6. So strategically, of course, let's say after queen takes d5, black has quite a good situation in the center, and it would have been just great, this e4 d5 defense, if not that black violates with this another important rule of the opening play, which is not to jump out with your queen too quickly, yeah, because now white starts to gain tempis attacking black's queen. But again, yeah, there is an advantage and disadvantage, so it's not obviously so bad to play d5, of course. Altogether, what can I say about the arising positions in this opening is that it's very much, most of the time, it very much reminds the pawn structures of Caro-Kann defense, which we will study later, which is d4, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d, knight takes e4. So more or less the same structure. Which is quite solid for black if black is in time to develop well, to castle, and to finish his development. So that is the main battlefield of this opening, is that white should try to be fast because he has a certain development advantage in development, and try to create initiative and some maybe even direct threats. Using this time, his opponent is finishing his development, yeah, and trying to castle and to get his king to the safe place. So after e takes d5, yeah, there is a move knight f6. It's actually already, well, really out of fashion. I wouldn't recommend you this move. I think white is quite considerably better here. So of course the black's idea, he wants to take with a knight, yeah, on d5, and then not to lose tempis moving around with his queen. Well, I mean, white can try to protect this pawn, of course, to play c4, but then black has whether e6, whether c6, this pawn sacrifice, and after white, if white takes one of those pawns, e or c pawn, then black has a better development, and there is a certain issue with the d4 square, and that is considered to be more or less okay for black. But d4 is quite a problem, yeah, because now knight takes d5 is logical. There isn't a move bishop g4. It exists. It's more like a, tricky move, trying to confuse the opponent. First of all, white can play in a very principled manner, which is f3, trying to hold this pawn. Let's say bishop f5, and now g4, for example. So black is trying bishop g6, c4, e6. So black tries to sacrifice the pawn and then to try to develop initiative because he has some development advantage. But for example, white can simply play knight c3, e d5, g5, knight fd7, knight takes d5, knight c6. And probably the best move is h4. I think this position is better for white objectively, but of course it's very sharp. And here, well, it's possible to win with black also, even though, again, white is probably considerably better if he knows what he is doing here. But the main problem of bishop g4, in my opinion, is bishop b5 check. This is very nasty move and very simple. So I would recommend you with white just to check, because now if c6, white can take d takes c6. That's a very important point, because if bishop takes d1, there is c7 check. and if of course queen d7, then t8 mate even, and after knight d7, white simply takes the queen and then takes the bishop. Yeah, so this doesn't work. Therefore, or after dc6, if b takes c6, then white is just in time, yeah, to move his bishop out to protect the queen. He's just a pawn up. And after knight bd7, white simply can play bishop e2. Not the only move, but the simplest one. And after takes on e2, now black has to take back the pawn, and c4, knight f6, knight f3. And white is simply better here because he has very comfortable development. Knight on d7 is not so great, and he just castles, knight c3, bishop g5, rook d1, and black is suffering here. It's not totally, it's not too bad for black, but very easy play for white, and he has an advantage, so there is no point for to play like this with black. And therefore knight takes d5, but now c4. Knight f3 first, g6 usually is played, and c4. That is quite unpleasant, this plan. Knight b6, knight c3, bishop g7, and of course there are some ideas here. You can always play h3, bishop e3, and so on. But that might be not completely clear, but very unpleasant, I think, is c5 move. So it's just, white is just developing his initiative. He wants to get his bishop to c4, let's say, after knight d7, and after knight d5, bishop c4, let's say knight takes c3, b takes c3, and here it seems that white is just better, because castles, and he has a very strong initiative here. So I think the old theory goes like, for example, b6, and now one of the possibilities is to play rook e1, bc, bishop g5, and it's quite difficult to protect the pawn on a7. It considers to be better for white. So knight f6, all in all, is it's a very dubious experiment to play like this. But queen takes d5, that's another story. That's more serious. Knight c3, that's the most logical move. And now there are two serious variations. Of course, there is a queen d8 move. It's played from time to time. d4 c6, trying to get this Caracan structure, but that doesn't look to be, it's not extremely logical yet to take on d5 and then to come back to d8. So even though there is nothing forcing for white to get a huge advantage, but it's clear that there are many ways to be at least slightly better. I can even show you that there is a move knight e4, very strange move, which, you probably wouldn't play. You would just try to develop pieces instead. But actually, after knight e4, it's a transposition to Caracan. Yeah, so which probably means that, this queen d8 is not an equalizer. But then, of course, queen a5 was always the main move in this position for many, many years. But lately, last, 20, 30, if you want, maybe 30 years, the queen d6 move actually became quite fashionable, and I would say maybe it's even nowadays a little bit more popular than queen a5. But let's start with the queen a5 move, d4. So now again, as I've mentioned already, it's all about the black's development. Yeah, so if he's in time to manage the development, he's okay. So white has to be very aggressive, playing this position very aggressively, trying to develop the initiative. Of course, what is important that black should first try to get his bishop out from c8. Yeah? If he just plays e6, then it seems to be just a bad version of French. Yes, and it's not clear why did we take with the queen and went to a5. So black's conceptual plan is to develop like c6 and bishop f5 or bishop g4 after knight f3, then e6, knight f6, knight d7, bishop e7. That all the pieces are harmoniously developed. But white has some methods to fight against it. So usually black is playing knight c6. Knight f6. Sometimes black can start with c6 first. Yeah, there is there are some tricky move orders, bishop c4, bishop f5, so that he wants first to develop the bishop, get the pawn on to e6, and only then, to play knight f6. You can check those small details with move orders, but I'm not sure it changes much. First of all, it gives white some interesting opportunities to play like g4 even. I think even this move is quite interesting, bishop g6 and something like f4, e6, queen e2, trying to get f5, knight f3. Pretty dangerous for black, but even if he plays knight f3, e6, bishop d2, I think there is nothing really better for black than to play knight f6, which will transpose to the main line of queen a5. So that's why more common move is knight f6. Now knight f3 is the most logical. White tried also some like different move orders like bishop d2 to play. Also makes, of course, some sense, but knight f3 is logical. Now c6. That's anyway in this variation. This move is played sooner or later. If very typical, if black is playing bishop g4, then white usually has here. It's a bit premature because very typical plan for white is to play h3. Okay, now if you take on f3, you just gave up two bishops, and it doesn't look like a good deal because if knight c6, even bishop b5 comes. So after h3, bishop h5, and now, it's typical example. White has to be very active, playing g4, bishop g6, knight e5, and he develops a very dangerous initiative. So if knight bd7, there is knight c4, you have a problem with the queen, which is also one of the typical problems of this opening for black, is that his queen can get even trapped sometimes. So if you are playing black this opening, you have to be always alert, to make sure that you have a nice, place for your queen always, to retreat. So c6, that's why c6, just to have queen c7, and now h4. So very typical idea for this variation. In this variation is just to try to fight against this bishop on g6, trying to play h5. And very often black has real troubles, dealing with this bishop. So let's say knight bd7. Now if h5, black is just in time, to take on e5 here, just tactically. But knight c4, queen c7, h5. The only square is e4, and now white can even, for instance, take on e4, bishop g2, and he's just better. Has two bishops and quite a serious initiative. So bishop g4 is not a good move. Possible to start with bishop f5, but probably doesn't change that much. It is an idea. For instance, white can try to play knight e5 immediately, trying again preparing g4 and so on. That is an interesting option. Another option is bishop c4, e6, bishop d2, for instance, and now maybe bishop b4. There is this variation trying to play, let's say, after a3, if white is playing a3, so to take on c3 and queen b6, something like this. Actually, it's not too bad for black. In fact, even if it looks really strange to give up this bishop, because if he manages to develop then c6 on knight bd7 castle, it might be not so bad. I think that the main line here goes like d5. White is trying to do something very quickly. And it's a bit better for white, but maybe black can hold. So this variation has to be investigated, this bishop f5 variation. But so the idea is to play e6 and without c6, bishop b4 in this line. And if you play c6, it's a transposition. But again, white has some other options like playing knight e5. But the main line normally is c6 here first. Now bishop c4. Yes, so if white is just playing very solid moves like bishop e2, castle, he's just developing and not trying, to develop his initiative quickly, then usually probably black is quite fine. So for instance, he plays bishop f5, castles e6, then he just wants to play bishop e7, knight bd7, and if knight h4, bishop g6, it's a typical Caro-Kann position. Bishop on e2 is not so active, so black is doing pretty fine here. So this type of position I wouldn't mind playing with black. Therefore, probably white's best idea is to start with bishop c4. That is pretty direct. move. So again, to fight against black's development. So obviously moves like e6 are out of question because castles queen e2, and again, the bishop on c8 is a problem. So that's not in the spirit of this opening. So black has by all means to try to develop his bishop. Again, bishop g4, h3 is not so easy for black as well as earlier. Here it's a bit better than bishop g4 on move 5, but still, let's say at least here you can take an e6, and again, this position is playable for black, but definitely he hadn't equalized out of the opening. Or after bishop h5, there is the same, let's say bishop d2, knight d7, queen e2, and the same idea that once you play e6, all kind of tactical possibilities with d5 very often are possible, but also g4 ideas. Again, g4, long castle, and so on. All in all, it's seems to be a better choice to put bishop on f5 in this position. And now white, okay, if he's trying to play for short castle, again, this is this is very playable for black. e6 and bishop e7, as I've mentioned already, that's probably is quite okay for black objectively. But white's best options, he has two options. One is very aggressive, is to play knight e5 now. Okay, so attacking the pawn on f7, e6 and g4. Again, you see the same motive here of the opening is trying to fight against this bishop. So bishop g6, the main theory goes h4, knight bd7, again the same motive. If h5, knight takes e5. If white takes on g6, hg6, that is pretty fine for black. I mean, that's not what he is worried about, and not exactly what white wanted by playing h4. But the problem is knight takes d7, knight takes d7, h5. Well, black barely manages to save his bishop here with the bishop e4 move using the pin, of the queen and king. And now there is some theory. Rook h3 is very interesting move with some theory, but black seems to be doing fine there. The main move is short castle. Again, bishop is in trouble, has to retreat to d5, and white, for instance, takes on d5 and plays bishop d3. This position is, I think it's slightly better for white, but black has his play also. It's playable for black because, his main idea, bishop d6, for instance, and wherever white is playing some normal move like c3, or he's playing queen f3, which makes sense just to stop black from castling long, just to attack the pawn on f7. The main black's idea in this position is to try to play g6 and to create some play against white king. I mean, don't be too afraid if you are white having this a bit exposed king, because it's very difficult to mate. It's not really about mate, but black has a certain counterplay here. For example, white can react on g6. Okay, I guess you don't really want to take on g6 because after hg you're opening up the line. h6 is possible, but I'm not quite sure because black might have, let's say, some play castle and then followed by f5. So probably, let's say, a move like h4, just pushing the pawns on the flank, or any other move, c3. The idea is that after gh, maybe it's interesting for white to play g5 now. To put the pawn on g5, which is covering the king. Let's say h4, king h1, and then to continue his play on the queen side. A complicated position. I think I've studied it a bit at some point. Playable for black. Objectively, probably a bit in white's favor, but it's a complicated game. In any case, if you're playing white, this is an interesting option to go for it. But bishop main move is bishop d2 here. So white is trying to play for quick development and long castle. And also bishop on d2 is is making this queen on a5 a bit uncomfortable. So bishop d2 is a main move. e6. And white has a few options here. So here, this position is all about very concrete play. Here, so you need to be if you want to get some advantage with white, you have to be very quick here, and you should know what you are doing exactly, because, for instance, moves like knight h4, bishop g6, let's say takes, queen e2, bishop b4. Okay, you took this bishop with a knight, but black managed to develop, yeah, and then knight bd7, probably it's perfectly fine for black. So the old main line was queen e2. This is a kind of classical main line. So black doesn't have time to play moves like bishop c2, obviously, because then d5 comes and it's just crushing. So black really needs to be in time to develop here. For instance, yeah, I mean, there is always this kind of knight d5, knight d4 ideas. Also d5 ideas are possible. So if you're playing black here, you must really be careful. You better know the theory well here. And the best move is bishop b4. I think I had a game like this with Malachov, with a strong grandmaster, and he had played at some point queen b6, long castle, knight bd7, yeah, it's playable. But then why I got better, I managed to take this bishop, and using the development advantage, managed to get quite unpleasant initiative and win the game at the end of the day. But bishop b4 is considered to be main move. Let's say long castle, or you can start with a3, but black has knight bd7, of course, because bishop is not hanging, and then taking on c3 once white castles. So if long castle, knight bd7, and yeah, this kind of old main line seems to be doing black seems to be doing quite okay according to the theory. a3, for example, well, sooner or later, bishop takes a3 doesn't work. I mean, this is not working, so black has to take on c3 and queen c7. And white has two bishops advantage, but black has a very strong white color bishop here on f5, so he's managing finally to finish his development at least. And yeah, white can still try to get some advantage with knight e5, but there are many games on this position. But I think that is perfectly playable. For black, for instance, he can try to play b5, maybe is an interesting option, let's say, because if white plays retreats with bishop d3, then you exchange this bishop, and black is probably doing fine. And if bishop a2, trying to keep pressure on black's king, then, for instance, bishop e4 is working, followed by bishop d5, and the position is quite unclear. If you want something safer with black, you can also just take on e5, knight d5, bishop d2, long castle. And yeah, white has a certain advantage of two bishops. Maybe he's a little bit better, pushing the pawns, h5, h3, but black is very solid. So that I wouldn't be so worried about. But I think that if you're white, and also if you play black, I think the most, unpleasant move for black is knight d5. So knight d5, which forcing black to go to queen d8, knight takes f6 check. So now most of people are taking with a g-pawn, but I don't like this type of position, even though, again, it's playable. But I'm afraid that after c3, queen e2, yeah, it's structurally a bit unpleasant for black. So he cannot really make short castle, probably, then he will definitely be worse. So what black's trying to do is to make long castle, maybe to try to use the open G line to create some counterplay. But still, knight h4 is, yeah, you have to play bishop g6 after knight h4. And now let's say castles, long castle, logical play, and white just starts to push his pawns, a4, b4, a5. There is not so much play for black here, and I find black's position very dangerous, even if it's not too bad, but very easy play for white. Yeah, I would not go for this line. But actually, there is queen takes f6 move, which again considers to be pretty dubious for black, but maybe it's possible to analyze it. At least there is no direct refutation of this move. Queen e2. So white is trying to play for development, to use his development advantage in development. And now there is a bishop g4 move, for example. Then probably the most principal is d5. Let's say takes on f3, cd5, bishop takes d5, knight d7, long castle. So white has two bishops and development advantage, but from other point of view, has these weaknesses on the F line, those double F pawns. But all in all, seems to be that black doesn't have enough to equalize here. So let's say bishop a3 is a tricky move. Of course, you cannot take on a3 because of mate on a1, but c3 is a possible castles. Now bishop retreats, bishop e4, let's say bishop e7, and white is playing h4. Well, I think that he has two bishops, initiative, and the only minor issue for white is that he has those double f pawns, which a slight minus, but probably his pluses are much more important. So I would say that white should be better here. That's why. But after knight d7, actually, yeah, I think nowadays nobody really plays this with black because they think white is really better. But I looked at it a bit with the machine and I couldn't find any clear way for white to prove his advantage, even though, again, as often in this variation, especially Scandinavian defense with queen a5, especially, if you want to play it with black, you really have to take care because, you know, this queen is shaky, king is still, black's king is still in the center, and at least what you have to make sure that you're not losing by force here, that you manage to finish your development. I think that here this task is achievable. White has some ideas like h3. Possible to play h3, quite dangerous move also, but the most straightforward is bishop g5, queen g6, bishop takes e7, king takes e7. Frankly, doesn't look good at all, this position for black from the first sight, but computers are not so negative about it. Let's say king b1, rook h d8, and then somehow managing to get the king to f8 probably one day. I'm sure it is slightly better for white, for sure. I mean, but it's better for black than it looks, because it looks really terrible, but it's not too bad and it's playable for black. But all in all, yeah, this queen a5, if white knows what he is doing, again, if white doesn't know and he's just playing kind of solid moves, bishop e2, castles, rook e1, you know, then probably black will be fine. If white knows what he is doing, his plan and playing aggressively this opening, then probably he is objectively slightly better, and it's pretty risky for black to play this line, again, without a very deep knowledge of theory. So I would suggest you, if you want to study Scandinavian, maybe queen d6 is more interesting. There is a bit of less theory, and it's strange. So some positions are pretty strange, especially from the main line of this queen d6 move. But it's not easy for white really to get an advantage in those lines. And the play is kind of very unconventional, very tricky positions with sometimes, I will show you now, is a very strange play for black when he is not developed but still making few moves, you know, with the same piece, but still doing more or less okay. So it's kind of confusing. Sometimes the positions which arise in this line can be confusing, can confuse white, yeah. Also, if he doesn't know the theory very well. So queen d6, yeah, interesting move. Again, I want to say that queen a5 is perfectly playable as well. But my choice would be queen d6, and actually it was queen d6. I mean, I actually played in rapid or blitz queen a5 and queen d6 also, but for classical chess, for instance, or some rapid chess, queen d6 is a bit safer, definitely. So d4, knight f6, knight f3. So the idea is, again, black is trying to do the same, yeah, just to develop his bishop, to get his Caro-Kann set up, so to say, c6, e6, knight bd7, and white in return is having the same idea in his mind, is to use his advantage in development to create a quick initiative. So here, okay, bishop g4 as usual, h3. bishop h5, g4, the same story, knight e5, and it's not, I'm not sure that queen on d6 stays better than on a5, because here on top of everything, white sometimes has bishop f4 ideas, so here white is better. Bishop g4 is not the move I can recommend you. g6 actually is playable. There is no refutation. I played it a few times in Blitz and Rapid. I didn't dare, I think, playing it in classical chess, but I tried it intensively in Blitz. It's playable. It's a line I can recommend you to have as a kind of small weapon, because at least there is not much theory here, so you don't need to learn much, and the positions are not too bad for black. I mean, white probably has some ways to get some opening advantage, but in general, it is playable for black. So, for instance, bishop c4 is possible, but black is trying to play bishop g7, castle, then at some point a6, c5, something like that. I think that bishop g5, this is pretty dangerous for black, this idea. Bishop g7, queen d2. So white wants to play long castle, and let's say short castle, long castle, a6, for example, and maybe a direct way of playing like h4, trying to go h5. But it's not so clear. I mean, black has ideas like bishop g4, etc. It's a sharp game, which is not very well studied, not much theory here, so a lot of room for to investigate. It's a new position, almost new in the theory of chess. I think I played Rapid once with Vishanant, and he played, if I remember well, bishop e3 against me, bishop g7, queen d2. I mean, the same type of idea. So then followed by long castle. The game ended in a draw, but that's also possible for white. Also an interesting, very aggressive plan. I don't know whether bishop on g5 or on e3, does it make a big difference, or where it stands better, hard to say. But so it's more or less the same type of play. But if you are white and you don't want to study intensively this queen d6, g6 line, maybe I can recommend you to play simple bishop d3, bishop g7, and now knight b5. Of course, you can always play castle, and for instance, like I think Karyakin played against me in Blitz once. He just went knight e4, exchanged, and then c3, and white is a little bit more comfortable, but that's definitely not something black would be worried too much about, but very, very solid for white. But knight b5 seems to be an interesting option, because now the theory goes queen d8, bishop f4. That's why knight b5 here, just to attack the pawn on c7, that you don't have c6, so you don't have knight e8, if white would do it after castling. And if knight d5, bishop e5, which makes black, black has to take a decision now. It's not very funny to play f6 of course, in this position, bishop g3, and of course it's weakening a lot. Otherwise, you have to exchange this pair of bishops, which gives white a certain comfortable plus, but again, nothing too dramatic. And if knight a6, probably white would just play c3, using after c6, knight a3, using the position of the knight on a6, and this typical structure would arise in knight c7, castle, h3, which is more comfortable for white. Definitely, white has a bit of more control, a bit of more space in the center, and some advantage. But again, with black, you can always play it. There is nothing bad in this variation with g6. But main line is c6. This is so-called Tivyakov line, because Sergei Tivyakov, he was a big fan of this line. He played lots of games. Also, I can recommend you, if you want to study this variation with either color, I think he made some DVD on this line, and since he is a really good specialist, so if you're really interested to know all the details of this variation, you can find it probably on internet and have a look at it. But I will show you some main ideas here, so the most important theory of this variation, and give you my view on what to do with white and how to play with black. So the idea is that if bishop c4, very logical, of course, but now you see the difference. Black has bishop e6. That is a major difference compared with the variation of queen a5, that bishop e6, and exchanging bishops doesn't give white that much, and retreating doesn't make much sense. So if bishop, I mean, possible, but after bishop d3, for example, black can always continue bishop g4. If immediately bishop d3 is the same idea, bishop g4, and then followed by e6, knight bd7. So it seems that black is, at least white doesn't manage to create his activity so quickly as in other lines of Scandinavian defense, because here, for example, the pawn is hanging. Probably white has to lose time, making move like bishop e3, and black might be in time to do this, followed by e6. Shouldn't be too bad for black, this position. That's why the most dangerous move here is considered to be knight e5. So you see, again, all the same ideas. Yeah, so white is fighting against black's development with this move, because, for example, if g6, then already bishop c4 looks quite dangerous. Yeah, attacking the pawn on f7, and if bishop e6, you can castle, for instance, and I guess something like that, takes rook e1. Black loses too many tempes with his queen, and white, it should be at least slightly better. If bishop f5, now white has very quick initiative, develops quickly initiative. Bishop f4, queen d8, bishop c4, e6, g4, bishop g6, h4. Very typical play. h5 is threatening. Black lost too many tempes, and he is not doing well. That's why knight e5, knight bd7. And now, white actually, especially against Tyryakov, who played this line almost, it was basically his main, if not only, opening repertoire choice for quite some years, and he had played it even in strong tournaments like Vaikanze. So many tries here are possible. For instance, bishop f4 at some point was a very popular move. It's very solid, very safe for white. If you want just to be safe, to be a little bit better and safe, not to try to refute this line, but just to have a nice, comfortable, small advantage, that probably is a move I would recommend you. But Tyryakov was doing pretty okay here. He was managing somehow to hold his own against strong players such as Anand even. I think he made the draw once with Anand here in classical chess. Knight takes d5, queen takes d5, because the idea is that black wants this queen e4 check, so that is very important. Otherwise, of course, bishop c4 would have been very strong, but there is queen e4 check. Yeah? So that's why maybe white's best is knight f3, because you see, white doesn't want to change too many pieces, and now if queen e4 check, bishop e3, black usually plays knight b6, and white just continues his development with bishop e2, followed by castles. Yeah, again, this Caracan structure, knight on b6 is slightly dubious. Looks like white is slightly better. I mean, definitely, but it's playable for black. But more aggressive moves are, one is f4, a very logical. Yeah, also you just want to keep this knight on e5. Very logical way of playing. But knight b6 against Sergei Tyryakov was always somehow, almost always managing to hold his own in this variation, knight b6. Then black is trying to develop somehow very often via g6, knight bd5, trying to use maybe some potential weakness of white squares in the white position. G4 is one of the main moves. I think there was a very interesting game, Shirov-Tyryakov. Shirov was one of the few players who actually managed to beat Tyryakov in this variation. Black is playing g6, and then white has numerous options like bishop g2. Very sharp play, but also quite risky for white. Or another idea is maybe to play a4. I think that is what computers actually prefer, is playing a4. At some point, let's say knight bd5, bishop e2, g6, then white is just trying to play positional, maybe having his bishop on f3, pawn on a5. But of course, yeah, black is also solid and shouldn't be too much for white. But the main line is knight c4, queen c7. Now black wants to play knight b6 and then finally develop his bishop, to f5 or wherever. but queen f3, that is the main idea. So you see white is developing his initiative. He wants to play bishop f4 and to develop with tempest. So knight b6 seems to be the only reasonable move, bishop f4. And this is a strange position, which looks like, again, black has to retreat with his queen. Looks very strange, black's play, more than strange even, but it's not that bad, this position, actually, as it looks. Again, queen d7 was tried by Tivyakov many times, but I think here I don't like black's position, because white takes on b6, ab, long castle, and because d5 starts to be a real threat, so black has to go e6, and let's say bishop e5, knight d5, but he wants to play b5, f6. Again, this is very strange play for black. I mean, it looks like it should be really bad, but it's not too bad. Even though bishop c4 maybe is a good move, trying to get the bishop to b3. And it seems to me that white should be better here objectively, even though things are not so simple. But I would recommend you as black to play queen d8 in this position, this move. And it's not so easy for white, not so easy to find a clear advantage. Of course, the main idea is that if long castle, then there is bishop g4 move. That is a point that you cannot really make long castle. So white has to play a move like bishop e5. This is a main theory. And now, for example, there are many different moves in this position possible, but one of it is knight g4. I couldn't really, that's what I was telling about at the beginning of the introduction of queen d6, that this is a very strange play. I mean, queen is moving around, one knight goes to b6, another one to g4, all other pieces are not developed, but seems that black position is not so bad. I mean, it's not clear at all if white can get any considerable plus in this position. For instance, long castle looks logical, and now bishop e6. And again, you have to study, of course, this variation first, to study Tivyakov games, but objectively, probably if white will analyze it deeply, he will get some advantage, but it's not so easy. Yeah, so this variation is definitely playable on the let's say non-professional level, especially blitz on internet, definitely playable. Even objectively, from time to time, as a surprise weapon on the professional level, you can play it with black. But of course, again, white has many options, and again, what we can say about this Scandinavian defense in general. So let's sum it up. So e takes d5. Knight f6 I don't recommend here, so I would recommend you to take on d5, and now knight c3. So there is a major choice between having a queen on a5 on d6. Of course, with the queen on a5, it's easier to develop your bishop from f8. Yeah, but at the same time, this queen is getting, as you saw in all those main lines, sometimes is getting under attack via this bishop of d2, so it has to lose another tempi at some point, moving out from a5. So again, I think that for white players, you have to play here actively, aggressively, trying to use your advantage in development. That's the way to try to be better in this opening. Playing black, I would recommend you to study it move per move at some point, because here it's very important that you manage to finish your development without big damage. Yeah, if you manage to do that, then it's perfectly playable opening. But you have really to make sure, and lots of work is required here, lots of opening knowledge to play this variation. What is and after queen d6 again, d4, knight f6, knight f3. I think that g6 is a perfectly playable line. c6, again, lots of direct lines. I also believe it's playable for black, but you need to know it very well. So what attracts many actually players, especially on the non-professional level, on the Scandinavian defense, that there is there are not so many sidelines. After d5, queen takes d5, I mean, the play is pretty direct. From one point of view, I mean, if white is not playing aggressively and actively, probably he just gets nothing out of the opening. And the structure, which is very solid for black. So in some way, it is a kind of nice opening to play, unless your opponent starts to knows it very well and starts to pose you very direct, concrete opening problems with his active play. Then, of course, you need to know it well. And the main problem of this position for black is this queen, which wherever you put it on a5 or d6, it's always getting somehow under attack from time to time. And with white, there is a choice. There is a choice of options in every line, queen a5 or queen d6. But I would recommend white players choose one of those, main lines which I've shown you here and make some more work on it. And, try to know exactly what you are doing against the Scandinavian defense, because otherwise, if you just play regular moves, probably you'll end up having no advantage.